There's no way that we were not created by someone so much greater and so powerful and beyond our wildest dreams. Because
Hmm.
just the way things interwork, and as I'm learning more about functional medicine and how like certain enzymes and antioxidants and way that we can truly nourish our body, I see God written all over that.
Welcome to The Home and the Maker, sharing advice and encouragement about all topics homemaking and homesteading, and honoring the maker in all of it. Join Megan from Shine.fm for today's conversation. When it comes to living a healthy life, we want our whole selves to be healthy, body, mind, and spirit. And when it comes to the body, there's so much more to being physically healthy than just taking medicine when experiencing a sickness. And there's so much more to the story. And joining me on the podcast to talk about this today is my sister-in-law, Shelby. She's a wife and mama of two, soon to be three, and also a nurse practitioner with a passion for functional medicine. So thanks for joining me.
Oh, of course. I would love to be nowhere else right now except with you. And so I'm excited to talk about this.
Yay. Um, so start off with like describing functional medicine. I did look it up a little bit. I don't
Yeah.
know it just seems kind of vague in some
Hmm.
ways.
Yes.
So for me and for anyone who's listening who doesn't really know what this is, can you describe functional medicine?
Yeah. So I'll start off like with just a broad term too, and then kind of get into how I view functional medicine and as a believer, how I feel like it interrelates with just how God created us. So obviously I am a nurse practitioner, so I have a conventional mindset as far as, when you go to the doctor, I do feel like that is important. So I take everything with that into consideration too. But when I think about functional medicine, the broad term that I feel like people see a lot if they like Google it or look it up, it's going to say to get to the root cause.
Hmm.
And so that can have a lot of different meanings. People kind of come in with opinions too or just, influences they've had or experiences they had of what functional medicine is. So I definitely agree with the root cause aspect, but that is a very, broad term to describe a lot of different things. As far as getting into a little bit more of how I view that God created us, I think as believers, most of us believe that we're body, mind, and spirit, and that God created us and wired us to be that way. And so I do feel like this aspect of treating our health in that way, of looking at the person more holistically and knowing more of, not only how their genetics and how they're physically wired, but also how their environment, their mental status, their
Yeah.
everything affects our physical health. So, I think it really lines up with our belief as well. But that's kind of just a little bit of what functional medicine is, but
Yeah.
there's much more to it.
So when you became a nurse, were you aware of functional medicine, or was this something that kind of came up where you're like, you know what, this is it. This is what I'm passionate about
Yeah.
is getting to that root cause.
Yeah. So I feel like I've always, even though I've been really interested in science and how the body works, I feel like that's just a natural passion that God's given me. And
Mhm.
just learning how the body's wired is just so like amazing to me to see like God's hand over all of that. So getting into nursing, I really got into it originally because I felt called to, and I felt like it was just a great way to serve people and help people.
Yeah.
But all throughout my nursing journey, I've been interested in more of like a natural approach to health. And, a lot of times I think that there's a better answer and a better way
Mm.
to approach health. But that being said, I do think that the science part of it and the nursing education and all of learning how the body's wired is important. And truly learning how God created our bodies and using that to also say, how can we become a part of that and prevent, but also treat in a more natural approach.
Yeah.
And so, to sum that up, I've always been interested in natural medicine, but I think that this is just the path that God placed me on to kind of get a little bit of both and see the benefits of both. So,
Yeah. No, that's great. Now, for I mean, you see all kinds of things in the day-to-day life as a nurse practitioner, but when you're thinking about, and though your practice isn't functional medicine yet,
Yeah.
when you think about the root cause for what a lot of your patients are going through or what they come to you
Mhm.
with, is there something that you think like, this is a big thing that's missing from my patients' lives?
Yeah. So I think that yes, there are a lot of things I think that come together, but I think what can be hard about functional medicine is it's not always just like a clear cut answer.
Yeah.
It's more of how numerous different factors play into the greater scheme of our health. So it's really hard in a conventional setting to really get to all of those things because
Mhm.
people are really complex and really unique.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of time and relationships and really getting back to um, really functional medicine when you learn it starts with birth. Like it starts in the
Mm.
womb. We kind of learn how that affects and drives traumas throughout their life, environmental. So there's so many aspects to that that are really not, well, one, that are not really taught that are important in conventional medicine,
Yeah.
but also there's just not a time and a place. It's just not set up for that.
Yeah.
So
Especially when you only have like 15 minutes with a patient or something like that.
definitely, it's not set up for this kind of medicine. And so, um, yeah, even if providers believe in it, it's really hard to kind of do both in that space.
Yeah.
So,
Gotcha. So when it comes to thinking about all of the factors that go into someone's health, that can take habit building,
definitely.
habit forming. So when you might suggest some of these things to patients, if there's room for, something that might go towards their overall health, it's,
Mhm.
you might prescribe medicine, but you also might say do exercise.
Yeah,
Do you encourage your patients in how to make these things a habit so they stick?
yeah. So, yes, it's really easy. Like, in my conventional setting where I see patients is a lot, harder to really get to the nitty gritty things. But I think as looking at a functional medicine approach and as a believer standpoint, I think that, and why I also feel very, very passionate about it is because I do feel like there are a lot of what we say would be lifestyle things that in our day-to-day lives kind of get the back burner or our modern lifestyle just doesn't fit for it. With that being said, I do see that and believe that God really does have freedom for individuals in different lifestyle and habits that are not necessarily helpful to our health. Whether that's addiction, whether that's, being stressed all the time, whether that's a mental space, um, diet, all of those things, they all play a part. And so I truly believe that God wants us to be free in a lot of those aspects. And a lot of times they just have a hold on us, whether that is, more intense like addiction or whether that's, I'm not choosing to eat healthy today or
Mhm.
whatever it looks like. Because a lot of people have, come to a place where they are kind of held by that. And even though they want to make a change, they don't know how
Yeah.
um, or don't have the space to really focus on it. So I do think that, there is grace for all of that. And I truly do believe that, with the Lord by your side, that we view everything as, a process. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
And so I tell a lot of my patients, like, you know, even if it's something like smoking, like one less cigarette you do a day is helpful. And I think that, we just get so torn up sometimes with just the hold it has on us that we don't have grace for ourselves. But when we learn that, I'm going to get there, it's a process, just like with our walk with Christ. It's an everyday process of getting closer. And so I'm working on tons of things in my life too. So I really just try to encourage them with, we're not perfect, we're human.
Mhm.
And every little thing you do in the path of getting better is progress. And so that's kind of how I approach it. I mean, there's other like science-based approaches to different things that can be helpful for certain patients, but overall, I think just viewing it as that and having grace for yourself and seeking the Lord can just help more than anything else.
Yeah.
So,
So for someone who is, say, learning about this and wanting to take that functional approach, but all that is in their area is conventional practices. What would you suggest to them as far as kind of seeking that route that goes for the root cause, even though that might not be like they might not have a doctor or nurse practitioner available to them to work with them to figure out those things? It's just kind of researching things online, or what did you say?
yeah. So So it's kind of a hard question too, because I feel like, again, going back to functional medicine is a really broad term. If you look up like, naturalists or herbalists, there's a lot of things that could come up. And I have seen both in my like conventional practice and just like hearing, there's a lot of times where people feel like they have to buy all these different supplements and they have
Yeah.
to do this. And really it can be just, it's a business. So,
Mm.
um, so just being wary of those things and yeah, doing your own research is huge. But I think that the biggest thing is also, managing lifestyle. Because a lot of functional medicine is lifestyle. So, working on those things with diet and decreasing stress and getting enough sleep, getting, focusing our mind in a healthier place are all going to be helpful in your health journey. But if someone's looking for like, a specific practitioner, there are different websites too that have like functional medicine certified practitioners. The one I'm most familiar with is the IFM, so the Institute of
Okay.
Functional Medicine. So they have a website that you can go and get like C certified practitioners, and all of those practitioners are also licensed practitioners. So they're nurses, therapists, physical therapists, doctors, but they also have this extra certification, which I think is important because there's a lot of people claiming to be functional medicine, and you just don't know what they're going to offer you. So
Right.
that's where I would start.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, functional medicine does not necessarily mean no prescribed medicine, right? Like, is there still this balance? Not immediately necessarily prescribing something, but there may still be this balance of having the two intertwined.
Yeah. So again, there's many different practices and many different type of practitioners and what they believe are beneficial. I view functional medicine as more as something that's should be our innate response and can also be an adjunct. But I do believe that conventional medicine, there's a time and place for medications.
Mhm.
And I do think that they can be used really well together. And whether the prescriptions are for a season, like with certain things like anxiety, depression, or just something where it's doesn't have to be forever, but it's really something that's used as a tool. And then coming alongside of that with functional medicine to really get our body in a place of healing. I would say most functional medicine practitioners are going to try to get you off of prescription medicines and really focus more on other aspects like detox and all those lifestyle changes that we talked about.
Yeah.
But there's many different approaches, but I think that's also why it's important to do your homework and to know what you want out of a practitioner, because there are a lot of different practitioners and people claiming to do functional medicine that may be differently entirely. So
Yeah. Okay. So, functional medicine, from what I read online, it's patient centered, which in my mind, any practice would be patient centered, but is just kind of taking more of that approach, like you've
yeah.
talked about how it's really getting to know the person as an individual.
Mhm.
Is that kind of what it means?
Yeah, that's how I think would be a good way just to sum it up in like one phrase. Because yeah, it's learning all those aspects of a person that you can't truly know in that quick 15-minute appointment. Or even if you're coming back to see a provider, there's just not time to, nor would they say a need to go back to those aspects that functional medicine would.
Mm,
So
yeah. Okay. So in the long run, I'm assuming this probably like taking that preventative approach takes a lot of doctor's visits in the future off the table because you're preventing all of
yeah,
these things up
yeah,
front. Yeah.
yeah. So that would be the goal, right? It kind of too depends on where you're coming in your life and on your journey of health, because someone who has hasn't been caring for their bodies for a long time, that would maybe a different place than someone who really is, may not necessarily feel their best, but have they been diagnosed with X, Y, or Z,
hmm
but they're wanting to get ahead of it. So the goal would be yes, but I think that regardless, most people only feel better and benefit from functional medicine, whether or not they're using conventional medicine to treat something else.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, using it as like the adjunct too, but the goal would be
Yeah.
less doctor's visits, right? That would solve a lot of things in our healthcare system. So
Just end up, yeah, the goal would be to work yourself out of a job.
yeah, I mean,
No, we always need it.
yeah.
But so when it comes to like natural things, natural remedies, do you see a place for that? Whether it's herbal remedies or anything, have you any knowledge of how those things could be helpful before going to things like prescribed medicines?
Yeah. So again, I kind of hinted on this before too, but there are a lot, and as a conventional practitioner, I get asked a lot of times, I saw this on TV. Is this going to solve my memory issues or whatever it is? And, it's really hard to say yes or no, because with conventional medicine, we have the benefit of a lot of studies. We've seen over time how this has affected people. So we use that as, advice and
Yeah.
how things are going to affect you. But with a lot of these supplements, for numerous different reasons, we just don't have the studies to say this is going to benefit you specifically and you're going to
Right.
see results with this. But that being said, there are supplements out there that we do have information on. And I do think that as people kind of jump on board this desire for a more natural approach,
hmm
they're going to be more studies and we'll have more information. But there are supplements that are starting to get research that will be helpful for specific diagnosis or specific um, patients. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I still think that it's valuable to have a practitioner, because there are people who should maybe not take these medications. If they're on prescriptions, they can interact, or if they have other ailments like kidney issues or something like that where they can't metabolize or break these down, they can be harmful. So, but I am hopeful for the future that we'll have more information and be able to say like specifically what supplements are going to be helpful for individuals. But there's a time and a place, I should say.
Yes.
Time
Uh,
and a place.
I love that. Yeah, it would be great to kind of see that in the future as opposed to just
Yeah,
kind of the scariness of sometimes all the prescribed
right.
things. But
And I do feel like there is more of, like, for lack of a better word, but just like a movement of people wanting more natural approach, kind of like what you're doing as far as like homesteading and all of that. But it really goes back to like, you know, we used to have things a lot more simple and it seemed to
yeah,
work better. And we've gotten to this place where we've added all these extra things into, our makeup and our cleaning things and our
Yeah.
food, of course. So simplicity and homesteading and all of that, it's coming to like a lot of people are gaining interest in doing that. And maybe we used to have it more right than we do today. I don't
Yeah.
know. So
So, for your own self, and then as you care for your hubby and for the girls, how have you applied kind of those natural approaches in your own personal life?
yeah. So I laugh because it's an ongoing process. It's not an easy thing,
Yeah.
mostly with children who, may not necessarily like the healthiest things for them.
Yeah.
And like we were at the grocery store today and they want everything that are not good for them. So,
Of course.
so it's definitely a process. But like just starting at the house, I feel like just going through my cleaning, like my cleaning
Mhm.
supplies. There are good websites just to kind of help you navigate how clean this is. And it's something that you use, all the time that may not be the best for you. Makeup and just like, shampoo, all that stuff is easy to switch out. Like
Yeah.
your kids aren't going to really care too much about that. The nutritional part is a little bit harder, finding things that they like. Um, but I think just continually showing them through how you eat. Of course, there's always a place for things that bring you joy, like ice cream or
Yes.
whatever. But learning balance and not having this negative mindset every time you eat something bad that it's um, just you feel guilty. I feel like, but really just like this is something that brings us joy. We're going to use it in moderation, but it's
Mhm.
okay to do that every so often. But I also think what's really also helpful and something that I don't feel like I got when I was young is just educating your kids. Like
Mhm.
they might not choose to eat their broccoli today, but even if you learn why it's important and telling them why it is, not just, hey, eat your vegetables.
Yeah.
But I think eventually, they'll at least have that and they'll be able to say, this is much more than just eating my vegetables and not having ice cream. It's by nourishing my body through these vitamins that broccoli has, and sugar probably isn't the best for me and it makes me feel not the best.
Yeah.
So those are some ways I'm approaching it, but always a work in process. So
Always.
that's what parenthood is.
Yes.
So
I mean, when you see all the, I'm sure even all the characters on the boxes and all the
yes,
unicorn things.
bright colors, all that food
Yeah.
coloring. Yeah. So, but there are a lot of other options I think out there than they were even like 5 years ago. So, but it is a process to figure out what your kids will eat and what they want.
Oh,
But
yes. Someday.
yeah.
My last question, it's always my favorite. I feel like this shows the grand design of how God made us as we talk about functional medicine and just the uniqueness of each person's body, how so many things are interconnected, how He wants our whole self to be whole. You've talked about it already, but I don't know if there's just any last thoughts you have about how you've seen God as you've studied functional medicine, what He's kind of revealed to you about Himself in this.
Mhm. Yeah. So I do think that, the more you learn, particularly about the body, it's just amazing to see. There's no way that we were not created by someone so much greater and so powerful and beyond our wildest dreams. Because
Hmm.
just the way things interwork, and as I'm learning more about functional medicine and how like certain enzymes and antioxidants and way that we can truly nourish our body, I see God written all over that.
Yeah,
Of course, we're living in a body that has sin inside from, going way back to Adam and Eve. Like we
right,
we know that we have that and we are longing for, our new bodies.
right.
But what's also really cool is just how God created our bodies to heal. Um, And we have all this inside of us. It's really just learning how to create an environment for our bodies to thrive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just looking into that more can maybe even take your faith to a new level too, while also, honoring the body that God has given you. And ultimately, I think living a more full and vibrant life for the kingdom.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did.
Really a lot of passion here. And I think it has so much to offer people, both in their bodies, but also on their spiritual journey. So
yeah, I love that. Just focusing on, or just thinking more about the bodies God gave us, and the healthier we are, the better that we can be for the kingdom, which I think is really great.
Yeah. And just, all that God's given us, right? All of the skills, the tools, and our body is the vessel that we need to do that. And so, I think there's a lot of freedom here for people too. And that's why I'm really passionate about it. So,
well, yay. Thank you so much, Shelby. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Home and the Maker podcast. And for other podcasts from Shine.fm, visit the Shine.fm podcast channel.